It is September 1990. A man named David Grohl suddenly finds himself stranded and penniless. He'd been touring as the drummer for the band Scream when their bassist, Skeeter, suddenly up and left the tour due to, quote, girlfriend problems. So here Dave is, no particular backup plan in place. He calls up Buzz Osborne of the Melvins in search of rescue. Buzz just so happens to have a solution. There's a band that loves Dave's drumming and has even expressed to Buzz that they wish he was their drummer. The name of this band is Nirvana. The only problem is they're up in Olympia, Washington. Dave's gonna have to pack up his drum set and fly north. But first, he's got to iron out the details. At the very least, make a call. So he does just that, and begins chatting to a man named Kurt Cobain. Dave begins telling a story to Kurt about this awful party he and Scream recently attended. After a show, he says, they picked up a bunch of beer and headed to the apartment. When they arrived, only about 20 people were there, with guys all on one side and girls all on the other. They were total Olympia hot chocolate party, Hello Kitty people, Dave says to Kurt. This girl comes in and sits down and starts playing this total bad teen awful music, and after every song everyone would clap, and we were like, let's get out of here. In a blank, casual tone, Kurt simply replies, oh yeah, that's my girlfriend Toby. What a way to break the ice. It just so happened that Kurt was also at said party and was well aware that the band Scream had made an appearance. They were real rocker dudes, he would recall. I hated them. I thought they were assholes. Awkward interaction be damned. Kurt wants Dave in the band. Kurt, along with Chris Novoselic, drive to the SeaTac airport to retrieve Dave. He stays at Chris's and his wife Shelley's home for a few days, and then Nirvana gives him a proper audition. We knew in 2 minutes that he was the right drummer, says Chris. He was a hard hitter. He was really dynamic. He was so bright, so hot, so vital. He rocked. Now Nirvana already had a drummer, Danny Peters, and he was a talented drummer, but his style did not fit Nirvana's music nearly as well as Dave's. During an appearance on Calvin Johnson's KAOS radio show a few days later, Kurt broke the news to the public. Who is the new drummer? Calvin asked. His name is Dave and he's a baby Dale Crover, Kurt answered. Kurt acknowledged the awkward situation with Peters. Dan's such a beautiful guy, and such a beautiful drummer, but you can't pass up on an opportunity to play with the drummer of our dreams, which is Dave. He's been the drummer of our dreams for like 2 years. It's a bummer, a big bummer. The newly formed Nirvana would begin rehearsing in a barn in Tacoma. After living with Chris and Shelley for around a month, Dave then moved in with Kurt, in what was a far less domestic, orderly space.
Then he moved in with Kurt. What a disaster that place was. You guys ever going to clean this place?
It was a strange setup, and Dave and Kurt did not know each other well at all. Dave would describe the apartment as small, cluttered, dirty, smelly. He slept on a 5-foot couch, which was in the same room as Kurt's turtle tank. The clicking of the turtle's shells against the glass as they tried to escape would keep him up at night. It just felt so weird, says Dave. There wasn't a lot to do. There was a lot of time just spent sitting in the room totally silent, reading or just totally silent doing nothing, staring at walls or going downtown and seeing a 99-cent movie or shooting BB guns in the backyard. Dave was still living with Kurt when Kurt broke up with his girlfriend Toby. He was just a wreck, says Dave, just a mess. I was just tired of not finding the right mate, Kurt would recall. I'd been looking all my life. I've always been old-fashioned in that respect. I've always wanted a girlfriend that I could have a good relationship with for a long time. Kurt and Dave's rides in the van to Tacoma for band practice had already been quiet, but following the breakup, Kurt stopped talking completely. Finally, after weeks and weeks, Kurt broke the silence by saying, you know, I'm not always like this. I kind of just said, oh, that's cool, Dave recalls. But I was thinking to myself, oh, thank God. Nirvana would practice together for hours, almost every night. Dave's introduction to the group seemed to have brought about a legitimate change in the band's chemistry. Slim Moon, founder of the Kill Rock Stars label, would say, Kurt and Chris knew, and everybody else knew who saw them play, that they were only a hint of what they could be until Dave joined the band. Kurt had something new in mind for the next album, a subversion. In less talented hands, it could have been a disaster. In Kurt's, it would lead to the creation of an album that would define the decade. Kurt Cobain loved pop music.
I've always liked music that sticks in your head and it's repetitive. I just can't follow music that's really technically busy and, masturbatory. So I've always liked simple music.
And he had an innate talent for writing pop. But pop music that didn't necessarily sound like the pop music the general public was accustomed to. Bleach is a much heavier, muddier album than what was to come with Nevermind. But even there, Kurt's pop inclinations would shine. Dave himself would say of the album, I loved the dissonance and the chaos, and then there was this beautiful song about a girl right in the middle that could have been off a 60s Beatles record. On July 11th, just months before Dave joined the band, Nirvana would record Sliver, a song of which Kurt would say, I decided I just wanted to write the most ridiculous pop song I had ever written, in order to prepare people for the next album. In October, Nirvana as we would come to know them flew out to the UK to tour, and they immediately drew rave reviews and reactions, playing to packed houses. Kurt would continue to drop breadcrumbs of what was to come. When he spoke to journalist Keith Cameron, he would say, I don't want to have any other kind of job. I can't work among people. I may as well try and make a career out of this. All my life my dream has been to be a big rock star. Just may as well abuse it while you can. He added that the band was exploring a more pop style of songwriting. We figured we may as well get on the radio and make a little bit of money at it. Anton Brooks, Nirvana's publicist while they toured in the UK, recalled that, I remember Kurt saying that the album was going to go top 10 and that there were these tracks that were going to be massive as singles. You could see it in his face that he totally believed that. He knew it. There may be a small contingency of purists who would argue that Nirvana took a sound, a scene, and diluted it, compromised it for the sake of commercial success.
What is the most vulnerable thing in your own person that makes you lose all your strength?
I think a good example is like just a few weeks ago when I was in the States and I was really frustrated and I was feeling guilty because we were being accused of selling out and there was just so much conflict going on between us and some of the people in the audience, the more harsher people, just maybe kind of freak out, and lose myself and forget, what I was trying to do in the first place.
His plan was, or his vision was, I'm gonna make my art, palatable to reach enough people to where I can actually affect something.
Nirvana may have received recognition, credit for roads they did not pave, but the work that Kurt and the band produced is nothing short of brilliant. Even the heavier songs they wrote had a melodic hook, often deftly tucked away, that almost subconsciously tugged at the hearts of a listening public who otherwise may have never approached this genre of music.
I think that's one of the reasons Kurt wanted the record to sound heavy, was because he knew the songs were really hooky. They were really poppy, lots of pop melodies. And he didn't want to come across as sounding too poppy. So if the guitars are roaring and really thick and really heavy and the drums are pounding, that dichotomy, I think, would work for him.
Nirvana's notoriety began to grow. There was a sense that they were on the edge of a precipice, that at any moment they could explode. John Silva of Gold Mountain Management certainly sensed this, and was incredibly keen on taking the band under his wing. John Silva was the kind of businessman the band was wary of, but he was in touch enough with the underground scene to cross this barrier. Nirvana took Gold Mountain on as their management. Meanwhile, Nirvana was the darling of the A&R heads at a number of labels. The industry was catching on, with R.E.M., U2, and Jane's Addiction producing gold and platinum records. In Nirvana, they felt that they had found the next big thing. They were wined and dined, treated to meals in expensive restaurants. There's a saying, act like you've been there before. Well, Nirvana certainly did not. And not in the usual sense either, as they did not present as excited, desperate for success kids. No, Nirvana was then exactly what they always would be. Kurt would sit in near silence, warily eating. Chris would become near inappropriately drunk. Dave was certainly the most gregarious of the bunch, but his recollection was that we felt like snotty little hot shit kids. We felt like we were getting away with something. The pitches they received were unrelenting. When they visited Capitol in LA, they met a promotion man. He's this good old boy from Texas. Looks like he would like to beat my mom up, said Kurt. And I just wanted to dance on top of his desk with a dress on and piss all over the place. He asked me, so on that song, Polly, are you beating that bitch? I said, yes, I am. Then two other big jock radio programmers walked into his office and said, hey, we got 2 tickets to the Lakers game. And they all stood up and started cheering. We knew this wasn't the label for us. Gold Mountain Management believed that the 2 labels most befitting the band were Geffen and K. And eventually, they went with Geffen, in large part due to their success in bringing sonic youth into the limelight.
The main reason why we signed to him is because a lot of people who work in the alternative department have worked at independent labels before. Like, there are a few employees that work there who worked at SST Records and stuff like that. So they knew exactly what to do with us, and also Sonic Youth signed a year earlier, so they did a good job for them.
It would still be a while until Nirvana officially signed on. First off, Geffen had to buy out the band from their current label, Sub Pop. In the meantime, Gold Mountain doled out around $1,000 a month to each band member to keep them alive while they waited to record what everyone hoped would be, if not a huge hit, a reasonably successful debut album with Geffen. And it was during this period that Kurt Cobain began using heroin. In November of 1990, during a phone call, Chris told Dave the following, I gotta tell you something. Kurt's been doing heroin. What? Said Dave. How did you find out? He told me, Chris said. Don't tell him that I told you. But Kurt would tell Dave himself not long after. Dave tried to stay cool about it and just asked what it was like. It sucked. It's stupid. It makes you feel gross and bad. I just wanted to try it. Kurt said he wouldn't do it again, and I believed him, Dave recalls. It seemed so innocent. It seemed like a kid sticking a firecracker in a cat's butt and lighting it off for the hell of it. It didn't seem like anything at all. Kurt himself would recall, the whole winter that Dave and I spent together in that little apartment was the most depressing time I'd had in years. It was so fucking small and dirty and cold and gray every fucking day. I almost went insane at one point. I just couldn't handle it. I was so bored and so poor. We were signed to Geffen for months and we didn't have any money. We ended up having to pawn our amps and our TV, all kinds of stuff, just to get money to eat corn dogs. It just felt really weird to be signed to this multi-million-dollar corporation and be totally dirt poor. All we did was practice. It was the only thing that saved us. Even that got repetitious after a while. Let's take a quick pause here to discuss, of all things, a novel, Perfume, The Story of a Murderer by Patrick Suskind, Kurt Cobain's favorite book.
I've read Perfume by Patrick Suskind about 10 times in my life, and I can't stop reading it. It's like something that's just stationary in my pocket all the time. It just doesn't leave me, and every time I'm bored, like I'm on an airplane or something, I read it over and over again. Because I'm a hypochondriac, and it just affects me. It makes me want to cut my nose off.
What's the book about?
It's about this perfume apprentice in France at the turn of the century, and he is just disgusted basically with all humans, and he just can't get away from humans. So he goes on this trek, this walk of death, where he goes into the rural areas where there's woods all over the place in the small villages, and he only travels by night. And he just, every time he smells human, like a fire from a far off way, he'll just get really disgusted and hide, and he just tries to stay away from people. I can relate to that.
Now, before I even began this video, I read Perfume. It's an excellent, though thoroughly depressing read, and just as Kurt himself acknowledges, it mirrors his own perspective to a disturbing degree. Our protagonist is a savant. He possesses the talent of scent, but it consumes him, it haunts him, and he is disgusted by himself because he is completely lacking in any scent at all. He wonders if he is even human, and so does everybody around him. But he finds success, surpassing all the perfumers throughout France with ease. But he has no capitalist drive. He only wants to fix himself. He devises a perfume that perfectly mimics the human scent, and finds that once he has doused himself in it, he is suddenly accepted in society, rather than shunned. But this brings him no peace. In fact, it disgusts him. He begins killing young virginal women, who to him possess the purest, most intoxicating scent that exists. He processes their bodies, and just as he is completing the perfume, he is arrested for the murders and sentenced to death. But on the day of his execution, he wears this new perfume, and the entirety of the village begins to fawn and lust over him, eventually resulting in an enormous orgy. He slips away, but still finds no inner peace. It only makes him more hateful. The novel ends when he returns to his birthplace, where he pours a whole bottle of the perfume over himself, and the people, driven mad by desire, begin to rip him apart. This is all a long-winded way of saying that success does not buy happiness. Sometimes it only makes you sicker. On April 30th, 1991, Nirvana was officially, papers and everything, signed to Geffen. Kurt would call his father Don with the good news. Don was so touched that he began to cry. Recording was to begin in just a few weeks' time. Chosen to produce the album was a man named Butch Vig, who at the time was far from the big name we now associate him as. He had done work with Sub Pop, but had never produced for a band on a label as large as Geffen. Nirvana had worked with Vig prior, though not to a significant degree. Around a year earlier, they had begun recording demos for what they had planned to be their second release with Sub Pop, and Vig would engineer that demo session.
How did you meet him? We met him about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now, and we attempted to record our next record with him, and that's where all the bootlegs came from. He produced all those too, and it turned out really well. And we liked working with him, so we decided to do it again.
This time, Nirvana was to record at Sound City Studios in Van Nuys, California. Chris and Shelley drove their Volkswagen van with all the band's equipment down to California, while Kurt and Dave, rather than flying, decided that they too were going to drive down in order to experience the romance of the journey. They took off a few days early in a beat-up Datsun, but the car, being a piece of shit, overheated every 15 minutes or so, and it took them 3 hours to go 100 miles. So they retreated back home, parked the car in a quarry, and pelted it with rocks for half an hour before driving it to Chris's house, where they picked up their reliable Dodge Tour van. For the duration of the recording sessions, the band would be staying at a furnished apartment complex named the Oakwood, located nearby the studio. And it was here that a woman began to come by to visit Kurt. Her name was Courtney Love. They had first crossed paths in 1989 at a show in Portland, Oregon. The origin story is just as romantic as you'd expect. She looked like a classic punk rock chick. I did feel kind of attracted to her. Probably wanted to fuck her that night, but she left. After playing a show, Kurt sat down next to her. They chatted, drank some beers, and Kurt gave her some Nirvana stickers. I put them all on my suitcase, Courtney recalled, and I didn't even like his band. Courtney was far from a groupie. She had her own scene, her own band. Not long after Nirvana's arrival to LA, Kurt and Courtney would meet again, this time at a Butthole Surfers show. They would begin flirting by punching each other and then wrestling. Courtney aptly put it as a mating ritual for dysfunctional people. Kurt would recall, "She seemed like poison because I'd just gotten out of the last relationship that I didn't even want to be in. I was determined to be a bachelor for a few months, but I knew that I liked Courtney so much right away that it was a really hard struggle to stay away from her for so many months."
The crazy night I had with Nirvana was we went to see the Butthole Surfers in L7 at the Palladium in Hollywood. Unbeknownst to me, I think they all took mushrooms. And as soon as we got there, they all disappeared. They just disappeared. But the next day, we went into the studio and the band didn't show up. And a lot of shit went down that night. And needless to say, I can't really say what happened to everybody, but Kurt ended up, he was out of his mind, and he walked from the Palladium all the way back to the hotel in Burbank or North Hollywood, wherever we were.
We now arrived to May, and with it, the recording sessions for Nevermind would begin in earnest.
Okay, now why don't you like talking about it, though? What's the problem with going on camera and just relating a little story to do with it?
There's nothing to be said. It's all in the music, man. It's all in the music. It's all in the meat.
You don't think that people that are fans of you would like to hear what you had in mind, maybe, or what you were?
I hear what they have in mind, you know,
Yeah,
or how they interpret it.
You would.
We begin, of course, with the endlessly iconic Smells Like Teen Spirit, an enduring track born out of a walk down the deodorant aisle. It was Toby, Kurt's ex-girlfriend, and Kathleen Hanna of Bikini Kill, who would spot there on the shelves a can of, quote, Teen Spirit. Cut to a few hours later, when the two and Kurt strike up a drunken but engaged conversation on the importance of teenage rebellion, leading to Hannah gleefully writing on Kurt's wall, "Kurt smells like teen spirit." Kurt, adorably, loved this and saw it as a playful acknowledgement of the words he had spoken. It was not so long after the fact that he realized it was in reference to a deodorant brand. Kurt doesn't seem like the kind of guy who likes to hang around the deodorant aisle though, so who can blame him? From the jump, Kurt envisioned Teen Spirit as the, quote, ultimate pop song. It's a song that is, admittedly, composed of cliches, something that was not lost on Kurt and his bandmates, and throw Vig in there as well, as he would describe the song's memorable riff as really stupid, a cross between Louie Louie and Boston's More Than a Feeling. But that's what makes the song magic. The pop cliches are all there, but by the time the song was finished, it sounded anything but cliche. The push and pull of the energy between the verses and chorus, Kurt's haunting voice, it all comes together to create something more than the sum of its parts. Something that sounds familiar, yet brand new.
They were like, "Hey Butch, what do you want us to play?" I go, "Just play whatever you want. I'm just gonna listen and take notes and just run through everything." And they kicked into Teen Spirit, and it just floored me how powerful it was. So I remember getting up and pacing around the room going, oh my God, listening to it, watching Dave drum and just listening to how incredibly powerful it sounded. They finished the song and it sort of stopped. It was just dead silent. Kurt said, "What do you think?" I said, "Play it again, play it again."
Present during the track and throughout Nevermind are double-tracked vocals from Kurt, a technique he was initially against.
Hello, hello. With the lights out, it's dangerous!
Until Vig pointed out that John Lennon double-tracked his vocals religiously.
Kurt did a double track. And again, he didn't like doing double track, so I had to use the John Lennon reference, and every time he resisted, I said, "John Lennon did it." He'd go, "Okay."
Really, Vig had a hard time making Kurt, or the band, do things more than once in general. If there was any tension present during the sessions, it was this. I wanted him to double his guitars on some of the songs, especially on choruses, Vig said. And he didn't really want to do that. A lot of times he'd go, "I don't feel like doing that right now." But for the most part, when I asked him to do stuff, he'd eventually do it. There weren't any major arguments or anything, but I could tell when I was pushing him a little far and he didn't want to do something. A couple of times, he just put his guitar down or walked away from the mic and said, "I don't want to do it anymore." And I knew I wasn't going to get anything else out of him. In Bloom had been floating around for a year and a half at this point. Initially, according to Chris, it sounded much more akin to a, quote, Bad Brains song. But Kurt would rework the song, slowing it down, smoothing its edges. Vig would recall, it was a very quick take, second maybe. Dave did the backing vocals, having to sing about a step higher than he could sing, and his voice would break and we'd all be laughing hysterically.
He's the one who likes all our pretty songs, and he likes to sing along, and he come as you are, as you were.
The lyrics, "Come, doused in mud, soaked in bleach," are apparently a reference to an HIV ad campaign, circulated in Seattle around the time Come As You Are was written, and I am maddened to say that I have not found any actual evidence of this, and that there may be a very small chance it's an urban legend. But most likely, it's true, as flyers such as this one were extremely prevalent during the period. Despite initial protest from Vig, Breed is an example of a song where Kurt insisted he plug his guitar directly into the mixer, rather than recording from an amp. The result of this is a scratchy, lo-fi sort of sound, often associated with budget punk albums, which was exactly what Kurt wanted. They leaned into this sound further, with Vig recalling, "For the bass distortion we turned the amp up really loud, and in the mix we also overloaded the board. The solo was played through a tube screamer." A lot of Kurt's solos had a simple melodic sensibility, and he would record them very quickly. The song was over 2 years old at this point, originally titled after an anti-diarrhea medicine used by Tad Doyle, lead singer of Tad, during Nirvana and Tad's European tour.
This is a 2-hour ride. So what if my diarrhea comes back?
Oh, relax. You took these new Imodium AD caplets.
Just once. I always took the pink stuff 2 or 3 times.
Well, these are much better.
Introducing Imodium AD caplets. They're so effective, they often work in one dose.
They ran through 4 takes of the song, but Kurt, who always sang all out, quickly found his throat raw and his voice all but gone. This was a common occurrence. Initially, Kurt had a remedy. At this point, Kurt was definitively a heroin addict. He was beyond casual use. Well, Kurt didn't have a heroin dealer in Los Angeles, so instead, he got his hands on some codeine cough syrup, which along with placating his opiate addiction, served a second purpose, coating and soothing his poor throat.
When we were mixing it, we were really sick, and Kurt went down to the health department, and he got these codeine cough syrups, and we were just popping those, and we were just like in la-la land. And then we were like hands-on producers, just cooking on this codeine joy juice. And I think it had a big effect on how that record turned out.
This wasn't anything new for Kurt. Kurt would maintain his fondness for cough syrup, including that with DXM rather than codeine, throughout the rest of his life. And sure, maybe he was treating a raw throat, but really, it is just another example of Kurt self-medicating, specifically in a way that would get him fucked up.
That's okay, 'cause so are you. Broke mirrors.
Lithium is a song born out of a fascination with religion. According to Kurt, he thinks he may have been inspired from his time living with his friend Jesse Reed and his born-again Christian parents. It was one of the more difficult songs on the LP to record.
Most of the stuff was not done to a click, correct?
The only song that was done to a click was Lithium. And
why was that?
Well, there's a funny story why we did Lithium to a click. The day we tracked it, they started playing, you know, as soon as they kicked in, it sped up, and not bad, you know, speeding up's okay in rock and roll.
Yeah.
But it was the only time I noticed it really kind of lurching, and Kurt noticed that too, and he said, "What do we do? I just don't like the way this is feeling." And we did 3 or 4 takes, and we got to the end of one of the takes, and they didn't even finish the end. Kurt just said, "Stop, stop, stop." He goes, "This doesn't feel right to me." And then he launched into Endless Nameless.
Okay.
And I've never seen so much rage on a person's face. Like, it was scary.
And you were still rolling the tape.
We were rolling the tape.
Yeah.
And they launched into that song. At the end, Kurt completely smashed his guitar, blew his voice out. And I think he was, on that particular take, he was playing his left-handed Mosrite. And he smashed it to bits. And it ended up, the dust is settling, stopped the tape. I go, okay, guys, I guess let's call it today. And let's pick up tomorrow. And I'm thinking, oh, damn, I got to go find a left-handed Mosrite. Like, he had a couple of other backup guitars there, like a Jazzmaster and maybe a Telecaster or whatever, but he liked that particular Mosrite. I pulled Dave aside before they went out the door and said, have you ever played to a click? And he said, no, why? And he goes, I think maybe we should try it. You know, it might be worth it on the song to keep a really steady groove. And I always carry this tiny little rolling drum machine with me. So we roll a click, lithium, first take, boom, done. Perfect. I mean, I didn't have to do any drum editing. I was just like, oh my God, Dave Grohl is a machine. He told me years later doing Wasting Light that when I asked him to play with a click track, I broke his heart.
Polly is wholly unique to every other track on Nevermind because it wasn't actually recorded during the Nevermind sessions.
Polly is one of the songs that was actually recorded at Smart Studios that was going to be for the Sub Pop album and ended up going on to Nevermind. It's the only song that was done here that made it onto Nevermind. The song is very spare and it's very haunting. Sometimes the quietest songs become the most intense.
The song is famously based on a true story of a 14-year-old girl returning from a punk show in Tacoma, Washington in June 1987, who was kidnapped and tortured.
Well, there's a song about an anti song called Polly. It's through kind of a personal experience just because I knew the person that was and tortured. There's not much I can say about it other than it's, it's an awful crime, obviously, But I just decided to be really open about it with the lyrics and make it very, like in your face, so people will maybe think about it a little bit.
This is undoubtedly the most straight-ahead punk song on the album, and thus became their end-of-set, equipment-smashing song.
I remember shows where Chris and Kurt spent 3 or 4 minutes destroying their gear, and I'm just sitting at my drum set watching them do it. There's no music, but there's a couple thousand people watching them smash their guitars.
The smashing of the gear was really a shtick, so we can get off the stage after about 45, 50 minutes. It didn't matter if we played great or if we played horrible. You smash your gear, and it's just it's the stellar ending.
One baby, two, another says I'm lucky to meet you.
Drain You is about as unconventional of a love song as you'll find, and despite this, is dripping in romance. Kurt would later say it was one of his favorite songs he'd written. Tucked neatly in the middle of this pop song are some more experimental elements. Vig would say, instead of concocting a guitar solo, every time Kurt did a vocal pass, he would run to the side of the room at that part of the song and pick something up. Squeaky ducks, percussion things, or an aerosol. It became an abstract part for 17 bars. We just left them all in on the mix. This was another track they struggled a bit on, as it took, according to Vig, 4 or 5 takes, which the fact that that is considered a lot demonstrates how efficient Nirvana was at laying down these recordings. The title is the band poking just a little bit of fun at itself, as they believed that the song sounded like something a bar band would play. Initially recorded under the name Pay to Play during the Smart sessions, Stay Away is an example of how significantly the band's delivery of the music improved with the addition of Dave. Kurt changed the lyrics when he went in to sing it, says Vig. That surprised me. I thought the original lyrics were good. The song features some fantastic harmony vocals from Dave. Kurt just wanted him in a couple of spots, says Vig. We argued. Kurt wanted them out, but I suggested leaving them in until the end. When the song fades, you'll really hear them.
Something in the Way was definitely the hardest track to record in Nevermind. After 3 or 4 takes of trying to cut it live in the main room, it just wasn't happening. Kurt came into the control room. Out of frustration, he sat on the couch and he basically said, it needs to sound like this. He laid in his back and he started playing the guitar and he was barely singing. It was coming out almost a whisper. I was like, okay, stop, stop, stop. And I quick grabbed a couple of mics and plugged them in. I unplugged the phone, I turned the fans off in the tape machine and said, this is it, just do what you think you need to do right now. And I literally held my breath for 3 minutes while he sang it. I mean, it was so quiet and yet it was so powerful. And that was the core of the track.
It is a startlingly haunting and effective track, one with mythological origins. Kurt would say it was inspired by a period of homelessness he experienced as a teenager when he ran away from home. The legend is that he would sleep underneath the Yonge Street Bridge, but this has been refuted. He would hang out there sometimes though, and apparently eat some fish from the river, leading to the line, "It's okay to eat fish, 'cause they don't have any feelings." Kurt spent some 4 months houseless, hopping from spot to spot. For a bit, he slept on the porch of Dale Crover, drummer of the Melvins. Then he moved on to the hallways of old apartment buildings. But the song is just as much based in fantasy as reality.
People instantly assumed that Cobain talked about himself living under this bridge, and it went down in legend that he lived under this bridge. Very few people end up homeless and are that separated from their families. But the emotional truth of what teenagers feel is so captured in that song. And that's something that we all go through in our normal existence on this earth.
The album was complete. Everybody involved was very proud, very excited with the work, but tempered their expectations. Success wasn't a given. No one could have expected the impact the album would have, not just on music, but on the culture as a whole, as Nirvana's sound, look, and attitude bled into popular culture. Vig would recall, we hadn't realized when we started the record, but a lot of hardcore fans and industry people were very interested. I thought it would be great to sell 500,000 records. Initially, only 50,000 records were pressed, but within weeks, 300,000 were selling a week. Today, it has sold over 30 million copies and is one of the most bought albums of all time. I think Nevermind did change the music business to an extent. It killed the whole metal hair band scene in the US, and every label wanted to sign a Nirvana clone. Fortunately, or unfortunately, there is only one Nirvana. I think we realize now they had something that nobody else had. The songs are so hooky. They have such a beautiful melodic sensibility to them, and Kurt's voice has a persona that draws you in. Kurt was very knowledgeable about art and books. He was very liberal and had a passion, almost a hatred, for gay bashers, racist, etc. because he also felt like an outsider. He felt a kinship to the downtrodden, people who were abused. I miss him. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you would like to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing. I would also love to hear from you on what other bands or albums you would like to learn about. Please feel free to comment any suggestions. I have another channel, Making of the Beatles, where I do exactly what I did here. If that sounds cool to you, check it out. I also have a Patreon where for $1 a month, you can watch videos early. It's really just a great way to support me if you feel like doing so. Once again, thank you so much. Until next time.